We'll probably have those kind of tests. I think that's ultimately to be determined with the Commissioner of Education, with the local school districts, is how they feel best to begin the measurement from day one to the end of the school year.
Further questions? Thank you, Mr. President. But Senator Thrasher, in the absence of a beginning of course exam, how can you measure learning gain in a class? Senator Thrasher to respond.
The way you do it, I think, Senator Deutch, is to look at at some reference point, whether it's an examination. We're talking about pre-tests. I don't know whether an examination. I think, again, I think Commissioner Smith talked about this, and the development of those types of plans with the school district will be worked on during the course of the next 3 years as we begin to develop the assessments. And certainly a pre-test in some areas and some subjects might be the base. In some others, it might not be.
You're recognized for a question, Senator Deutch. Thank you, Mr. President. So, let me just okay. So we're not clear whether we have pre-test or not, but we are clear we have to have end of course exams, and we have to have end of course exams for all courses where there's not currently an FCAT. How many different courses? How many new tests will we have to create in order to comply with the terms of this legislation? Senator Thrasher.
I don't know the exact number, Senator Deutch.
You're recognized for the final question. Thank you, Mr. President. And as those, if we don't know whether or not we're going to have tests at the beginning, and we don't know how many tests we're going to have to create, how is it that we can be asked to trust that the Department of Education is just going to get this right at some point over the 3 years once we set them loose to do this? Senator Thrasher to respond.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think we'll be monitoring that, Senator Deutch, as we do just about everything else in education. This legislature certainly has the right to look at that, to ask for oversight, to ask to how they're doing, the progress they're making. And I intend to do that. And I think all of us would want to be interested in that. But, you know, I would remind you respectfully, Senator Deutch, this is being done in Hillsborough County. They're beginning to develop end-of-course exams. They're beginning to develop the kind of criteria that we're talking about. They're also in the Race to the Top application that many districts have signed on to, but many didn't. That's also something that I think that will be helpful as we move ahead over the next 3 years to develop these criteria and assessments.
Further questions? Senator Aronberg, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Senator Thrasher, in Hillsborough County, they're creating these end-of-course exams using money from the Gates grant. How are we going to pay for our end-of-course exams?
Senator Thrasher to respond.
Through the performance fund that we create in the legislation, and hopefully, Senator, through the Race to the Top funds.
Senator Aronberg for follow-up. Senator Aronberg for follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. President. Do you know how much does each end-of-course exam cost to create?
Senator Thrasher to respond.
I don't know that I have a precise answer to that. I think that'll depend on the subject. It'll depend on a lot of the circumstances around that particular course. Senator Aronberg.
Senator Aronberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. Here's my concern. So we don't know how many
Senator Aronberg for a question.
This is a question.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Since we don't know how many course exams there need to be and we don't know how much they would cost, how are we going to fund all that from the performance fund and also use the money? Because yesterday you had said that the money is also going to be used not just for end-of-course exams but for performance pay. So it seems like we're trusting that this fund is going to cover a lot of different items. Is this fund, which will be about $900 million a year, enough to cover the end-of-course exams and performance pay?
Senator Thrasher to respond.
I think it's more than adequate to do that, Senator Aronberg, particularly since the performance pay piece does not go into effect in 2014.
Senator Aronberg, you're recognized for your last question.
Yeah, last question. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. I guess there's nothing in the bill analysis that says how much this would cost. Is there anything to guide us as to, just to give us some marker to know exactly how much this has cost? Is there anyone that has come out with any estimates? Or are we just, flying blind on this?
Senator Thrasher to respond.
I think the national race to the top has given us some indication. Certainly the Commissioner of Education is working with folks in Washington on the Race to the Top grant. I think they feel that this is an adequate amount of money to deal with the preparation of the end-of-course exams, as well as get us started on the pay package in 2014.
Further questions? Senator Siplin, you're recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Thrasher, I just received a phone call from my school board member down in Osceola County. She's a school board member by night, but of course she's a librarian